Welcome to Mom and Mind, where we dive into all aspects of perinatal mental health and wellness related to pregnancy, birth, loss, postpartum, and new parenthood. It's so much more than postpartum depression. We raise the volume on all of these topics in the hopes that someday everyone will have the support and info that they deserve before they need it. Please note this podcast is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Welcome to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Cat. In our episode today, we are going to be listening and learning a little bit more about postpartum body image, helping people with disordered eating, specifically in pregnancy and postpartum, and also how to tell when you might need to consult a professional. Our guest, Catie Lynch, is a licensed clinical social worker specializing in eating disorders, body image, and the postpartum period. She has 2 daughters, a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old. She has made it her mission to help women stop dieting and find food freedom for themselves and their children. She's going to share with us a bit about her personal story throughout her life of dealing with body image challenges, disordered eating, and how she coped. There's some really good information in here that I think a lot of people can identify with and learn from, specifically because pregnancy and postpartum are very pivotal times in your life where you're dealing with a lot of body change, and it brings up anxiety sometimes or things that you didn't expect to be thinking about during pregnancy and postpartum. And one of those things, which I'm sure you've all heard of, is how to get that body back. And well, we're going to talk about that and what kind of damage that thinking in our society really does to us. And thankfully, Catie is here with a lot of great information for you to help you navigate this time of body changes in pregnancy and postpartum. So let's hear from Catie. Welcome, Catie. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to tap into your knowledge and understanding around body image and body changes and all of the really fun and stressful stuff that comes up around pregnancy and postpartum related to that. So how about just start wherever you'd like with a bit of your personal story?
Sure. So I've struggled with body image, I think, since I was old enough to understand what a body was. And I think, throughout most of my life, up until around my early 20s, I felt overweight and I felt like I lived in a larger body. I did not, just want to be clear, but I felt that I did. And so at around my early 20s, I had just gone through a difficult breakup and went pretty hardcore on a diet and lost the weight, thought that I was going to be really, really happy and that everything magically would get better. And what happened was it was really hard for me to maintain that weight. So my body did not want to be where I wanted it to be. And so in order for me to stay at that weight, there was a ton of behaviors happening. So what that looked like for me was a lot of restriction. And I really didn't exercise because I was so scared to gain any weight from muscle. So I just restricted a lot. I eventually got married, and kind of around that wedding time was where my, eating disorder and body image was the worst because I was quote unquote, sweating for the wedding or whatever that people do. And
Sure.
I had this thought in my mind and I was like, okay, if this doesn't get better after I get married, I'm going to get help. And if this is just about the wedding, then, I'll be fine if I gain weight afterwards. Surprise, surprise.
Right.
It was not just about the wedding. I was pretty obsessed still and devastated when my weight would go up. So I sought out treatment in an outpatient type of way then, which meant for me once a week therapy, once a week dietitian appointments, once a week group therapy. So I did that for about 6 months and it really helped. I was lucky in the sense that recovery took quickly to me. I think I was really desperate and ready for it,
Sure.
even though it was so difficult. But around that time, one of the reasons I sought out recovery was because I wanted to have a baby. And I didn't want to pass on the way that I thought about food to that baby.
Right.
So I got pregnant quickly. I got lucky in that way. So I think I was probably about a year into recovery when I got pregnant. And obviously my body changed.
Yeah, right.
And I am the type of person to gain weight quickly. And I don't ever have that period of not looking pregnant. And so what it felt like for me was just like 2 years of weight gain is what it felt like. And I was very lucky with a healthy pregnancy, but had, all the symptoms, nausea and,
Sure, right.
for forever. But, what was tricky beyond pregnancy was like all this stuff you can't control, right? Like
so much stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like my body was changing, and it was the first time where I felt like I couldn't do anything about it. Right. Like in the past, I would have gone on a diet or like worked out harder or changed something I was doing, but I was in recovery. So I wasn't doing that. And I was pregnant. So I was like, this is what is supposed to be happening.
Right.
I just didn't like it. And I never felt like that beautiful pregnant glow. Pregnancy doesn't really suit me, I will say. I don't feel like myself pregnant. And then to add up, on top, all of those bodily changes was challenging.
Sure.
So 9 months went by. I had the baby, very healthy labor. Everything was great. And surprise, surprise, my body didn't like come back. Mm-hmm. Like, I do hate that phrase because our bodies didn't go anywhere. Right.
Right.
Like we still have them.
Yes.
And in fact, like they're, my body is stronger than it ever was before, but societally I felt upset that I felt pressure to get my body back. Right. It seems like pregnancy is something that people really accept, like a bigger body and change. And then the second the baby comes out, people always want to talk to you about how you look.
Right. Yeah.
And even what feels like well-intended comments still didn't land well for me. So like, for example, people would say, oh my God, it looks like you didn't even have a baby. Right.
Yeah.
And of course they mean that nicely, but they think that that's nice because we live in, a pretty toxic diet culture world where being thin is everything.
Right.
And so that was challenging on top of like the challenges of having a newborn baby, which is the most challenging thing I think to date that I have done.
Right. It's a lot of work.
Yes, it was. And, besides your body being sore and uncomfortable and depending on the way, your delivery went, like you may be in a lot of pain, right? Mm-hmm. On top of people commenting on, oh my goodness, you look so great. Or, oh my goodness, you only have a few left, right?
Oh my gosh, right.
5 pounds was what I meant. And like, as young women / children growing up, we're just bombarded by these ideals about what a woman is and what a woman's body should look like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And postpartum, you typically don't look that way. Right. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but we feel like there's something wrong with it. Right. Which is the problem.
Yeah. There's so much just in what you've described with all of the body changes for yourself. I'm thinking of the people who are listening, you can really identify with all of that feeling out of control. Your body's changing. You don't know really in what way or how it's going to look or how it's going to feel. And, that in and of itself is
going to get back to where it was, it may not go back or it may, or it will be different. Right. But like the idea and belief that it's supposed to look how it looked before you had children is just odd. Right.
Right. But that is the reigning myth is that it's supposed to go back or it should, or any number of things that whatever is left over sort of after this baby comes is not good enough.
Right. And, a lot of women, parents feel that pressure instantly, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, after my 6 weeks of, like non-exercise are up, now I got to get it together. I hear a lot of women say that and feel as if, it's a personal failure on their part if their body doesn't look the same as it did when they were 25 or before they got married or before they had their baby. Yeah. Yeah. And my thought is always like your entire life just changed. Like your body probably is going to change with you, you know? Mm-hmm. Now, obviously it's a lot easier said than done to say that, of course, but the culture around that is just really, really intense, I have found.
Oh, absolutely. And your you had also highlighted kind of having a previous to pregnancy eating disorder or disordered body image really with pregnancy and postpartum can really have devastating mental, emotional effects with your body changing. What do you see in your practice and with people that you support? What kinds of things come up as the body's changing?
Yeah. I see a lot of people wanting to resort to behaviors, to be honest, even though they know it's not the right move and they're scared, of harming their child. So I'm talking about pregnancy at this moment. So they're scared about harming the fetus or the baby, whatever point they are in pregnancy, and they're feeling so out of control, right? Mm-hmm. Pregnancy is such a lesson in not having control. Mm-hmm. And for many people who struggle with disordered eating or eating disorders, that is really hard for us. And so they want to diet, or they want to do pregnancy perfectly, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I see a lot, is a lot of people taking on this role of, I'm going to eat really quote unquote healthy. Mm-hmm. I'm going to exercise every day. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to eat any, food that I have deemed bad / unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And so that makes them, feel really, really trapped by those thoughts, and then feel like they're harming themselves and the baby if they stray from that, idea. So I see a lot of orthorexia pop up. And so orthorexia is an obsession with clean eating, mm-hmm. which is, I think, what the world is obsessed with right now too. Yep. So I definitely see a lot of that. And then I also see a lot of people emotionally, truly just struggle with not feeling themselves. And then when they don't feel themselves, it lands on their body. So for example, I feel really anxious or depressed today. And instead of wanting to sort out that feeling, I'm going to talk about how much I hate my thighs, or how much I hate my varicose veins, right? Or my new stretch marks. Mm-hmm. And so that's sometimes where I like to call it where it lands.
So outwardly, they might be, I would say, shaming their own bodies. And internally, you're describing anxiety.
Yes. So much feeling happening on the inside and not knowing how to explore it or deal with it. But it feels, and I'm using quotes, quote unquote, fear to blame it on our body or want to fix our body, as if that is going to help the internal emotion. So that's also pretty common. And then unfortunately, a lot of doctors don't always know what to do with patients who have struggled with an eating disorder, and sometimes, give not maybe the best advice in terms of telling us what to eat or how much to exercise. And that can be really, really challenging. So, I had that example. As much as I loved my doctor, she was very anti certain food groups, which was really triggering for me.
Interesting. Specifically because of pregnancy or
in general.
Oh, got it.
So I would say typical questions, tell me about your diet, how you're feeling. Mm-hmm. And I would say, I basically eat whatever I want. I eat intuitively. And, there was some issue around the fact of me eating white rice or sweet potatoes or a bagel. And I was like, A, I'm in eating disorder recovery. You can't say this to me. Mm-hmm. And B, do you really say this to other people? And do you really believe this? Right. Wow. So, doctors, as well-intentioned as they are, they don't always know what to do with this. Sure. And they're also just as immersed in diet culture as the rest of the world is.
Well, now that's an interesting point, and I'd like to tease that apart a little bit, because I hear this debate a lot around kind of how health is measured through BMI, through weight, and everybody who goes to the doctor, they're weighed unless they know that they can opt out. And then the issue of BMI comes up. I've heard all over the place that BMI is used across the board, but it's not really an accurate measure of health. And despite all of that, it can be really triggering for people, right? To be weighed and to have their BMI a certain number, and then have the doctor kind of doubling down on that.
Yes. And I have found with most, first of all, I tell most of my clients not to look at the scale. Mm-hmm. That doesn't always work and it doesn't always help. Right. But I have found that because, BMI and weight are just pretty standard measures that doctors have to take, they want to get those measures. And it's not because they necessarily believe that they're accurate either, but they have to get them for insurance purposes, right?
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah. Or
that's like a soapbox issue right there.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what I've found a lot. You can ask not to, right? You can't ask not to be weighed. I have found that people really struggle with that because they don't want to defy their doctor or a nurse, or the nurse may look at them like, what is wrong with you? Right. So even when I do blind weights, so meaning I just don't look, like the nurse will be like, why are you doing that? You know, like, and I'm like, well, I don't care what the number is, but I don't need to know, you know, like for my own, you know, my soul doesn't need to know that.
Right. I love that.
And for BMI, right? BMI I always had a hard time with, because I was always in a high / quote unquote, like obese weight range. And I was not anywhere close to being overweight and or obese. Right. So those numbers have always been like, what is this? You know?
Right. Yeah.
And, but because that number was there, I always felt like, well, I'm obviously not healthy enough yet. Right. Because my disorder was fueled by like, I just want to get healthy. Right. Which I think is a lot of people's belief. And then these arbitrary numbers online of like, oh, if you're 5'5", then you should weigh this and you should be this BMI. I was following that. And that was nowhere near where my body wanted to be. So
can I stop you there for a minute? Because you've used some language that I think would be helpful for people in talking about where your body wants to be versus where you want to be. And especially for like pregnant and postpartum women, can you explain what that means?
Yes. So our bodies are naturally, so everybody in the world has a set point weight. And what that means is your body has a specific about like 10 to 15 pound range where it likes to sit. So what that number may be is usually the weight that you come back to after you've dieted and it like didn't work, or after you've, wherever your body wants to go, and most people don't want it to be. Right.
Okay. So,
right. That's what a set point is. And you have no control over it. Like in my belief and in many eating disorder therapists' belief is that your body knows where it wants to be. It is us that decide that if that number works for us or not. And I found that the more people diet, the higher that set point weight becomes, because your body has gone through so much weight cycling.
Right.
So for like also pregnant women, you know, once you've had your child, your body eventually will probably come down to its set point weight, or maybe a bit higher, maybe a bit lower. But your set point weight can change as we get older, and it's to protect you. So it's a protective mechanism.
How do you mean?
So for example, like when we go on a diet, our body is in a starvation fasting mode. And so we kind of have this natural inclination to binge or overeat. And it's our body's way of telling you like, I need food. I need it now. Right. Like I need to be able to eat. So sometimes when people lose weight early on, their body gets stuck right at this point of like what they call it a plateau. Right. And they're like, why can't I move from here? And it's like, well, your body's protecting you, because this is where your lungs want to be. This is where your organs want to be. This is where your muscles want to be. This is where your heart wants to be. And as we get older, right, like for example, into our like maybe 40s, 50s, 60s, that's like kind of when our body starts changing, right? Like our hormones are changing. Menopause occurs for women, right? And so our body is like kind of creates this protective shield around us so that we don't like go into a starvation mode and like get sick and die. Like kind of like the short and the long of it. But it's often why people who are like 30 are like, why can't I be the size I was when I was 17?
Right.
Like, well, you're not supposed to be, like biologically, that's not right.
Well, in pregnancy specific, what's that?
But I was just we get lost in those ideas of what we should be.
Right. And in pregnancy, I feel like that's even stronger. I mean, I think there, for people who love pregnancy and feel great during pregnancy, maybe it doesn't matter as much. in terms of where their weight is or how they feel in their body as much. But certainly there's this idea of you're just supposed to be like as you ever were, but with a bump or something like that. I've heard time and time again people saying, well, my doctor told me I should only gain 15 to 20 pounds, but I'm already 20 pounds and I still have 20 weeks to go. What am I going to do? And they become panicked about it.
Yes. And it's really, really difficult because, I don't really think we have a whole lot of control of our weight in general, but especially in pregnancy, we don't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I remember being pregnant with my first daughter and I was like, I'm just going to do a test, right? Like I'm going to have kale for dinner tonight. And then the next day I'm going to have pizza and I'm going to see if I gain weight both days. I gained weight both days. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't because of like what I ate. It was because my body's trying to help me carry a healthy baby. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, and it just goes to show your body knows what it's doing and it's there to help you and protect you and guide you. And our head is the one that gets in the way of allowing it to do its job.
Sure. Yeah. I think too, what you're touching on there is just the ability to trust the process or trust your body even sometimes. I'm thinking especially for people who've had years and years of dieting or even any kind of loss or medical condition or anything that complicates being able to rely on their body or having trust there. That it must get so complicated.
Yes. Trusting our body, I think, is one of the really hardest things ever. We are so, as a society in general, so cerebral. Mm-hmm. And then to learn how to put faith in our body and in our feelings, I think we have to learn how to do it almost, which is why I feel really grateful that I went into recovery prior to pregnancy. It doesn't mean that you cannot recover if you are pregnant or after. You certainly can.
Right.
But it did help me. I was already learning how to eat intuitively and learning how to feel intuitively. That's such a skill. And I hate to use that word, but like, it's such like, you really have to learn how to do that because we don't do that. We don't trust ourselves. Right. And especially like to your point of like, if people have trauma in the body or, X, Y, and Z related to the body, it is much harder to feel like I'm safe doing this. Mm-hmm. And I think in general, safety is why people try to diet and restrict and do these health plans, is that they're seeking safety, even though they can already have it.
Wow. That's a major point. It's so difficult to get to because in some way we're trained against trusting our bodies. Maybe less now, but certainly, there's like the clean plate club type of parenting that back in the day, like you have to eat everything on your plate, whether you're hungry or not, that kind of stuff that I think just is woven in some ways. That's just one example of how societally and maybe even in family culture, we're taught to not trust from early on.
Absolutely. And if you had, parents who were on diets and didn't trust their own bodies, or
right.
If you maybe were, quote unquote, a bigger child, you might have been told by the doctor, like you need to cut your portions in half. And so that doesn't let you trust your body, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many instances I feel like where we are told we can't trust ourselves. And so leaning into that self-trust feels really scary.
Sure, especially with going into pregnancy and postpartum where you don't know what's happening just in general.
Right.
You don't
know anything.
You don't know anything. So
don't.
It really, like, I think because of the anxiety that comes with that and not always like clinical level anxiety, but just worry. Certainly sometimes clinical anxiety is just so much harder. Like you're doing something that's brand new that you know nothing about except for, what you see on TV. And that's
not helpful.
That's not helpful. Yeah. So what do you say to people who are pregnant and worried about body image and worried about their weight?
I really, really try to emphasize taking care of our emotional self before we even touch on the weight. So when we are in those really vulnerable early stages of postpartum, I'm all about survival. Right. And we can talk about your body in a little bit. Now, I realize your body is causing you distress, or you believe your body is causing you a lot of distress. And it may be, right? But likely the intensity of the emotion that is probably seeping out of you is about the fact that you have a newborn, and not the fact that, like, you know, your stretch marks appeared. And we'll get to both, right?
Right.
But I think that, like, very delicate time of pregnancy / the postpartum period is, if I could redo it, I would trust myself more. I would talk to other people about it less. And I would focus on my needs because I didn't pay attention to them. I was really focused on how to take care of the baby and not so focused on how to take care of myself. And even as a therapist, it's like, I knew better, right?
Right.
But I didn't know better. I didn't.
Of course.
And so the things that I struggled with, I really would, instead of having like a birth plan for mothers, I would say, like, let's have a postpartum plan instead. Because the birth is going to go how the birth goes, but we have some control of the postpartum period. We can say who can come over and who can't. We can have really great food in the home. We can have, you know, help if we can afford it / if there are neighbors or friends or family around. What can we do to set ourselves up so that we don't feel so scared? And, you know, maybe not everyone feels so scared, but there will be scary moments. There will be amazing moments. But I think a lot of it is recognizing that if we're struggling with the body distress, that it's a lot more likely that is a microcosm of, like, a much bigger distress that's happening, which makes sense because postpartum in the beginning is, you know, a roller coaster.
Yeah. And what do you hear from people who are struggling with body image and postpartum? What are the, like, top concerns or I don't want to say complaint, but concerns, or I guess, like, things that they say?
Yeah. A lot of my clients / peers, like, would say, I really want to work out again. Like, I really, you know, like, I wish that I could exercise faster because I feel like trapped that I'm not allowed to. You know, a lot of people in C-section recovery can't exercise pretty, you know, like the way that maybe a smooth vaginal delivery went. So I hear a lot of, like, I really want to work out again. I hear a lot of, I'm breastfeeding and I haven't lost weight. I hear a lot of, I lost, you know, the 20 pounds really quickly, but these 15 won't budge. I hear a lot of women feeling really nervous about how they look in front of their spouse. And if they'll be, you know, still desired and feel beautiful to them. I hear a lot of women just not feel attractive at all, right? Which, you know, there's milk coming out of their nipples and, you know, there's so much happening physically in the body at that moment that it's even, you know, that you don't still feel like yourself quite yet, right? You're still kind of like the incubation period may be over, but it's like stuff is still seeping out, right? I know that's kind of a gross way to put it, but, you know,
it's there.
And so I hear a lot of people pretty desperate to feel like themselves. And I think that they have equated themselves with also how their previous body looked. So I find that pretty often, are people not understanding why they have to buy new clothes, even if they're at their regular weight, right? They're like, my clothes don't fit, but I'm still this number. I'm like, yeah, but your body's totally different now, you know? Or like, and that is a struggle. And, you know, then I have a lot of clients who just feel, you know, like the postpartum period is so challenging that they, instead of focusing on the postpartum period, they want to focus on the body because that gives them this illusion of control, right?
That makes me wonder, you know, obviously there's distress and stress and anxiety, but how would somebody at home know that it's like the difference between, you know, being upset that their body's not the way that it used to be versus like, well, maybe I should see somebody about this?
Yeah. I think duration is a part of it. Like, how long are these feelings lasting? I also think that maybe I'm not the best person to ask this because I think everyone should see somebody.
All right. Well, yes.
But yeah. But especially postpartum, I think that we don't get enough checkups as moms, as new moms, to check in and see how we're doing. But I do think that should be one of when you're doing your postpartum plan, can you make an appointment for a check-in appointment with a doctor, a coach, a therapist, somebody to check in with, right? Because some of your symptoms are going to be super, super normal and some might not be, right? And we want to make sure that we know the difference. And so how can we tell if something's more serious? I think a lot of the level of distress, right? Can you still do things? Are you feeling trapped by these thoughts? Are you able to take care of your ADLs? So activities of daily living. And I know that looks really weird when you're a postpartum mom. We're often not showering, right? So
or sleeping.
Right. And so and to remember, when we don't sleep, we feel terrible. We feel delusional, right? Mm-hmm. And so the postpartum period is tricky in so many ways, but I think that that's even more reason to have someone to talk to.
Sure.
Because it can be isolating, it can be scary. And if you are experiencing, I don't like to say worse, but more intense symptoms, at least somebody's hearing about it and you're not living in that by yourself.
Yeah. If you already know that you have a history of disordered eating or body image and have done work on it, then you might be a little bit more aware during pregnancy and postpartum that it's showing up. But for people who it doesn't register for them or they haven't explored it, that this might, be at a clinical type of a level of something to look at. You said it before, they're engaging in behaviors.
Sure.
What would that, what are a couple of things that people might be doing that could tip them off that, hey, maybe this is something to get help with?
So I think dieting in general is a behavior. And so what that means to me is, are you restricting, right? Are you restricting food groups, calories? Mm-hmm. Are you really heavily involved in counting macros, points, all of that? I know that some people have feelings about that. My feelings are that it's all fairly disordered. Mm-hmm. If you are feeling really exhausted, but then still feel like you must work out, if you don't want to exercise, but feel like you have to, if you are binging, right? So typically, there's not a typical, for anything, but often if we're restricting heavily, a binge is a pretty normal response to that. Mm-hmm. So are we binging? Are we, using laxatives? There's kind of a laundry list of things.
Sure. Yeah. But it all sounds like trying to control.
It's trying to control your weight or how you look, right? Through means that can be really detrimental to our physical and emotional self.
Yeah. Would that feel like anxiety or would it feel like obsessive or?
Yes. I mean, so most people who are doing this are pretty miserable, right? They don't think that there's another way to live in order to keep their shape than to do this.
Right.
But they feel like they hate it, So I mean, people who struggle with with eating disorders or disordered eating are typically really depressed and anxious. They may not look like it, right?
Right.
Because a lot of this is about appearing quote unquote perfect or striving for perfection or striving to feel, how did one of my clients put it today? I have it together, right? And part of looking like I have it together is being thin or thin for me, right? So, but the distress level would be high even if you don't recognize it, which is hard about eating disorders because the feelings get manifested into the physical, right? So people may act really normal, but engage in these behaviors because they're feeling compulsive. And that's how they release their anxiety or their depression, right? So instead of dealing with my loneliness or my anger, I'm going to eat less tonight and that will make me feel better. So
well, I guess that isn't always connected to the get my body back.
Not always. Stuff. No, that's definitely a more, I would say, severe version.
Okay. Yeah.
So people who want to get their body back like they may experience some of that, but I think for the most part, they're feeling pressured from like diet culture and the fact that so many people eat in a disordered way that all that stuff is super normalized.
Okay. Yeah. I was thinking if we should go into that a little bit. It's one of those things, if you don't know that it's
at what you're doing. And I think that that's really common. Like I didn't know what I was doing was disordered until it was really disordered. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's unfortunately the way it looks for a lot of people because our diet and wellness industry is marketing like lifestyle changes versus dieting now. And so
sorry, can I clarify? You mean they're calling it lifestyle changes, but it's still a diet?
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Oh, that's tricky. Yeah.
Right. So everyone I think is well-intentioned in the sense that they want to feel better, look better, whatever that means for them. And they are making lifestyle changes, but it's under the guise of a diet. And because they're often not different. So, people and like these dieting companies market that way, right? Like WW, marketed so that it's not Weight Watchers anymore. It's WW. So it's like about wellness, right? And same with Noom, right? So like the other diet is like, we're not a diet. We like do therapy on a phone with you. And it's like, no, you don't, right? Like you're not doing therapy on an app like that. It's not what's happening.
Oh my goch, are a lot of eating disorder therapists upset about these sorts of things?
Yes.
Yeah.
We are upset because it like really targets. So like everyone wants to be healthy, right? Everyone wants to be healthy, but all of this messaging then makes it feel like if you're not eating this way or living this way, you're unhealthy and therefore you're not good enough. Is like I think the sentiment behind it.
Oof. Wow. And that's shame is a motivator.
Yes, exactly.
And also apparently a moneymaker.
Right. Exactly.
Ugh, yuck.
And so, they often, when I was postpartum, like I would get all these ads for like, join Noom, join Weight Watchers, join this, like, and it feels tempting.
Right.
Right. Because you want to feel better. You want to feel like in control, like your life is like kind of crazy with a newborn in your life. And so it markets well, right? And so it makes sense as to why, a lot of postpartum people feel, the need / desire to lose weight because their life is feeling stressful and out of control. And, a diet makes us feel in control in the moment. Eventually it doesn't because like, I think a lot of times a diet can control you, but it feels like the answer when you're struggling sometimes.
Right. So I'm thinking too of, essentially what I think what I hear you saying is don't diet. Diets aren't great. Diets are not good for you.
That's absolutely right.
So for the people who do go to that or have a history of that, they might be feeling like, oh my gosh, if I can't diet, then what do I do? I'm just going to be fat forever or whatever. Like that starts to feel out of control. How do you help people to get over that hump?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of, so what I use with clients is health at every size approach, which is an approach that deals systemically with, like, it's very anti-diet. And it helps people recognize that you can be healthy at many different sizes.
Great.
And that being thin does not necessarily equate to being healthy.
Right.
We talk a lot about internalized fat phobia, which most people have, but we do a lot of work around intuitive eating because to me, that really is the only way to achieve food freedom. And for people who want to diet, want to lose weight, like I honor the fact that that's what they want. Am I going to help them lose weight? No. Can people lose weight on their own? Of course, right? But like I don't believe in intentional weight loss. Sometimes we change things about our lives and weight loss happens. Sometimes it doesn't, right? But that to me, in order to like live a happy life without being controlled by food is not focusing on the weight and on dieting and on weight loss.
So this, broad strokes is figuring out how to be content and or happy with who you are as you are.
Yes. Yep.
It feels like that's one of the hardest things as humans have to do, but it
is really hard. It is really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of societal dismantling to do, right?
Sure. Yep.
And talking a lot about that, because a lot of people don't understand or know that, like this system was designed for, people to buy it, right? Like diet culture in the wellness industry is nearly $100 billion industry for people to buy products, right? Not because they really care about your health.
But then we us are just sitting in our home sort of feeling bad about ourselves, like that we should be doing those things.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, a lot of to me, it's like a lot of unlearning, right? Like learning how to trust your instincts and yourself, not obsessing about what other people are doing and eating because everyone's doing something, right? Like
sure.
Some sort of diet or exercise routine. That just doesn't have to affect you, right? And especially for new moms and postpartum people, right? Like the goal, I think, is to survive. It is to find what works for you and your happy medium, and to eat what feels good and to move how that feels joyfully, right?
Yeah.
And it's not to be stressed out by the macaroni and cheese, right? Like that doesn't sound like an enjoyable life to me. And so like always thinking like, what are my values, right? Like how do I want to live? And is this matching up with that?
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And for, anyone who is pregnant, postpartum, new mom, whoever you are, right? Like, I don't want you to feel bad about wanting to lose weight. We all have desires to lose weight because that's what society has told us makes us acceptable, right? Like there's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way. But some resources that I have found to be really helpful is the Intuitive Eating book, which is by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich, I think is how you pronounce that. That's been really helpful. And honestly, talking to a coach or a therapist that is trained in like disordered eating and the postpartum period. Yeah. Because that's, really, really helpful. But most of all, like, what your body wants, right? We just tell ourselves that we don't know, right? Like we know when we need to sleep. We know when we need to take a shower. We know when we want a cheeseburger versus a piece of fish, right? We know. We just like, our brain just like hijacks it, right? So it's okay to give in to trusting yourself and like, you will be better for it and you will be a better parent for it because like your intuition, like you can't outsmart it,
I love
like
that.
It's there.
Yeah. I love that. And thank you so much. I just think this is so valuable because certainly for people even for people who don't sort of have a diagnosed eating disorder or even have disordered eating or know that they do, there's so much, like you're saying, woven into just our culture that sneaks in that we feel guilty and ashamed about. And, having you really lay this out for us and let us know what it sounds like inside, so to speak, is just so valuable. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Kat. It was fun to talk to you.
Thank you so much again, Catie, for being with us. And for those of you listening who'd like to get connected with her, please find her at CatieLynchLCSW.com or CatieLynchLCSW on Instagram. And if you know of anyone who could benefit from hearing this episode, please do share it with them. The more we understand about this important time in our lives of development and growth, the better off we'll all be. You absolutely don't have to suffer alone or in silence. There is help available. If this is your first time joining us on the Mom and Mind podcast, please do go subscribe from whichever platform you listen to us on. And you'll get each and every one of these episodes downloaded directly to you when it drops. There are so many episodes to listen to and choose from and share with people who could benefit from this really critical information. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share this podcast. Together we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Come connect with us at momandmind.com.